Hey there, Connor here with a list. Two lists, in fact. My top 10 best movies and my top 10 worst movies of 2015. 2015 was, all told, an alright year for film. Compared to the previous year, 2014, however, this year was disappointing. Sure, I saw significantly more movies this year, 136 to be exact, so the margin for seeing bad movies was greater. But last year we got Boyhood, Whiplash, Interstellar, The Lego Movie, X-Men Days of Future Past, Gone Girl, John Wick, Godzilla, 22 Jump Street, The Babadook, Selma, and while I'm not the biggest fan of Birdman and think Snowpiercer downright sucks, a lot of people really love those movies, and I can see why. All across the board, there were great movies. Action, sci-fi, horror, comedy, drama, animation, you name it. 2015? Well, the first 8.5 to 9 months were pretty hard to get through. Sure, every month or so we got a little nugget of gold, and the summer produced some highly enjoyable smaller movies, but the majority of big studio flicks were really not good. Of course, I couldn't see every movie this year, but if you're curious about all of the movies I saw, then there's a link to my Letterboxd list of films I saw in 2015. I'm going to start with the worst so we can end on a high note, but before I do, these are numbers 30 through 11 of my worst movies of 2015. Keep in mind, none of these are in my top 10. Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Road Chip, Strange Magic, Aloha, Poltergeist, Chappie, Fantastic, Daddy's Home, Vacation, The Perfect Guy, By the Sea, The Boy Next Door, Take 3, Paul Blart Mall Cop 2, The Transporter Refueled, Pan, Hitman, Agent 47, Hot Pursuit, The Loft, Unfinished Business, and The Gunman. Number 10, Mordecai. January 2015 will always live in my memory as one of the worst months for movies I've ever seen. Even by January standards, it was garbage. The only good movies were two limited release December 2014 movies that got wide releases, and everything else was bafflingly awful. Opening with the usual crappy horror movie, token piece of trash animated movie, hokey thriller, lame action movie, boring buddy comedy, The Loft, but Mordecai stood out among the worst month of the year as particularly bad. This comedic caper was meant to start a franchise but bombed, and for good reason, even with a star-studded cast that included Johnny Depp, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law, and Paul Bettany. Mordecai tried way too hard to be a self-aware Austin Powers-esque comedy in a post-Jump Street world. I wanted to leave the theater the second Johnny Depp's goofy cartoon British voice said its first sentence. He couldn't possibly stick with that stupid voice for the entire movie, could he? He does, but it only gets worse from there. Unbearably annoying in pretty much every regard, with abhorrent characters, a world that never materializes or comes to life, not a single joke that lands, recurring gags that land on an even less common basis, action scenes with no drive, and embarrassing misogynistic cameos from Jeff Goldblum and Olivia Munn. Immature, not funny, annoying, poorly acted, and poorly directed, Mordecai would be higher on a worst movies of the year list any other year. I cannot believe there are 9 movies I hated more. Number 9, Sinister 2. 2015 was a bad year for horror. Aside from It Follows, I disliked every single horror film released. But movies like The Woman in Black 2 and The Lazarus Effect were bad in a conventional way. They were bad, very bad, but they were harmless, and it's hard to be vile towards them because at least The Woman in Black 2 had great art direction. The Lazarus Effect had a concept that might have worked as a TV show before it divulged into complete stupidity in its third act. Then there are horror movies like Sinister 2. The film follows a mother and her 2 children on the run from their abusive husband/father before they find themselves haunted by the demon Bagul from the first movie and Deputy So-and-so, also from the first movie, on the demon's trail. Sinister 2 is everything wrong in one place. I mean, what is it I'm supposed to be scared of? I can't be scared of Bagul because he doesn't actually do anything, and his name is Bagul. I can't be scared of the ghost children because the child actors on display are absent of anything remotely creepy and give some of the worst child performances I've seen in a movie. Here, watch this movie. It's my favorite. Since none of these are scary and I don't care about any of the main characters, what am I supposed to be afraid of? What are the stakes? But what really makes me hate Sinister 2 is when it sinks into shameless exploitation. The 8mm murder recordings add nothing to the narrative or characters this time around, making them gratuitous and a cheap and needlessly gory distraction to get a reaction out of its audience. It also has one of the children call their mothers the C word. Why? Just to get a reaction out of the audience. The abusive husband brags that he's going to rape his wife. Why? Just to get a reaction out of the audience. Yeah, it's that kind of movie. And the movie's just plain stupid. Why would a child be jealous of demons and ghost children paying more attention to his younger brother? Why do the ghost children insist on playing creepy vinyl records to accompany the 8mm murder movies? With obvious scares telegraphed from a mile away, characters stupid enough to fall for the so-called scares, and bottom of the barrel void of creativity exploitation, Sinister 2 is awful. But it wasn't the worst horror movie of 2015. Number 8. Rock the Casbah. Comedy was also a genre that didn't fare well in 2015. Sure, Trainwreck was cute and had its moments, and Spy was a genuine surprise that garnered plenty of laughs from me. The funniest movies of the year weren't pure comedies. Case in point, Rock the Casbah, a movie so bad you'd be forgiven for thinking it wasn't a comedy. While everyone dogged on Gem and the Holograms for its miserable performance at the box office, Rock the Casbah opened the same weekend and proved you could debut with a worse opening weekend. Since a lot of you probably never heard of it, Rock the Casbah was an alleged comedy starring a sleepwalking Bill Murray as a sleazy music producer who finds himself stranded in the Middle East with a hooker with a heart of gold played by Kate Hudson and a soldier of fortune played by a robot who resembles Bruce Willis, all the while bumping into arms dealers and trying to find a way out when he discovers a young Muslim girl who can sing. If you're going to make a comedy, you need to have energy, even if you're making a dry comedy. Rock the Casbah is what happens when every conceivable thing goes wrong when making a dry comedy. I would say the characters are unlikable, but the actors aren't embodying anything resembling a character. I'd say this movie never finds its footing, but that would imply this movie had a roadmap as to where it was going. It aimlessly wanders from tone to tone, place to place, character to character, and sucks at every turn. I mean, what on earth possessed anybody to want to make this movie? Rock the Casbah is a boring, long, and perplexing movie-going experience. Number 7. Love the Coopers. By the time you get to November, it's about time for the Oscar movies to be released, and you can expect a lot of hard-working quality on screen, and you'd think the worst is behind you. Nope. Love the Coopers is that dysfunctional Christmas family comedy we get every year, but this time it's worse. A lot worse. John Goodman, Diane Keaton, June Squibb, Olivia Wilde, Marissa Tomei, Ed Helms, and Alan Arkin are only some of the people who make up the loathsome Cooper family as we see their various adventures around Christmas as the movie follows about 6 subplots leading up to their family dinner. So what makes Love the Coopers so bad? First of all, the characters are practically interchangeable. Marissa Tomei, Diane Keaton, and Olivia Wilde are basically the same character, only in different situations, and the same goes for John Goodman and Ed Helms, which makes the absurd amount of subplots needlessly self-indulgent to say the least. Second of all, the dialogue for these characters add to the sameness of the characters and the lack of structure. It's basically a series of characters using monologues to complain and complain some more. Seriously, it's like a Star Wars prequel on how everyone needs to explain how they're feeling and what they're scared of and what they want in life. Third of all, the structure is broken. Ed Helms complains about his fears, then Alan Arkin complains about his fears, then Diane Keaton complains about her fears, then Marissa Tomei complains about her fears, then we go back to the start of the line with Amanda Seyfried complaining about why her life sucks, then John Goodman complains about why his life sucks, then Anthony Mackie complains about why life sucks. You get my point. But the movie is also tone deaf as to what it's saying. It simply complains about things without offering any kind of solution. It's also a Christmas movie that contains some anti-Christian undertones, which opens up the door for plenty of satirical possibilities. Nope. Not love the Coopers, and I've not yet scratched the surface of the mind-bogglingly stupid third act or Steve Martin's narration. Oh God, the needless, pandering, overbearing, incessant narration. I could go on forever as to why this movie sucks, but just know this. It's the 7th worst movie of 2015, and yeah, I'll go there. I hated the Coopers. Number 6, 90 Minutes in Heaven. I missed a majority of the faith-based films in 2015, like Woodlawn, Where Hope Grows, and Do You Believe, but I did see 2. One was War Room, a well-intentioned but nonetheless uncomfortable sermon on how you're supposed to pray, and the other was the 6th worst movie of 2015, 90 Minutes in Heaven. Based on the non-fiction novel of the same name, 90 Minutes in Heaven is about a preacher, Don Piper, who was declared legally dead after a head-on car collision and claims to have seen heaven, and came back to life 90 minutes later only to endure months and months of pain and suffering in a hospital. This kind of premise transcends the Christian belief. The thematic implications of rejection, questioning your faith, etc. are fascinating. But does the movie do anything to mind the potential of those ideas? Hell no. That's only the beginning of the disaster that is 90 Minutes in Heaven. The premise is of a man who lost a pulse and spent months in agony, which is quite ironic because this movie has no pulse and I felt like I spent days in that theater in pain. Hayden Christensen, who gave us the iconic and Oscar-worthy performance of Anakin Skywalker in the second and third Star Wars prequels, plays Don Piper and gives without a doubt the worst performance of the year. The movie opens with him giving a sermon so bad I thought the movie was trying to tell me he wasn't a good preacher. But no, he's apparently an awesome public speaker, and Christensen's performance is that wooden. He delivers every line of dialogue the same way, and I hope you like this angle because you see him lying on his back and being sad for 80% of the movie. Whorish product placement from McDonald's, scene after scene of Hayden Christensen moaning and wailing on his back in a hospital, scene after scene of Kate Bosworth looking sad out of windows. It's numbing. It never ends. It's misery porn. Oh, and the heaven sequence is just as boring and vacuous as the rest of the movie. The production values are cheap, and I hated just about every aspect of 90 Minutes in Heaven. Number 5, Pixels. Anytime Adam Sandler is in a movie, it's generally one of the higher profile turds of any given year, and Pixels is no different. Hated by pretty much everybody, I don't really have much to add. The sexist trophy wife ending is jaw-droppingly incompetent. It's not funny. The video game concept is wasted. It's not funny. Kevin James is the president of the United States. It's not funny. The attempt at commentary on today's video games is irritatingly uninformed. It's not funny. The action scenes are lazier than Sunday Morning. It's not funny. The cheat code logic doesn't make any sense. It's not funny. All of the actors look dead behind the eyes, and it's not that funny. But what really grinds my gears with Pixels, and something nobody seems to be complaining about, is just how incoherent Chris Columbus's direction is. Dutch angles, high angles, and low angles are used incorrectly. How? Film is a visual language, and the incorrect use of visual storytelling is especially inexcusable considering we're talking about the guy who kickstarted the Harry Potter franchise. Another thing about Sandler flicks is the lame cameos, but they're not even trying this time around. At one point, the man who created Pac-Man, Toru Iwatani, is introduced, but it's not the real Toru Iwatani. It's an actor playing Toru Iwatani, so the cameo means nothing. So yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it that hasn't already been said, but just know that I think Pixels sucks, and it's the 5th worst movie I saw in 2015. I made a 13-minute rage video on my Facebook, and there are 4 movies I despised more. Number 4, Seventh Son. After January, I was overjoyed that it was February, because in the past, the first week of February has produced us decent movies like The Lego Movie, Warm Bodies, and this year it was the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water. Oh, but that doesn't mean a terrible movie can't also come out in that same weekend. So we also got Seventh Son. What a dud. Jeff Bridges plays a spook, whatever that is, who sounds like he constantly has chewing tobacco on his gums and speaks about a seventh son of a seventh son who will be his apprentice to hunt witches. Julianne Moore plays one such witch, an old adversary of Jeff Bridges, and what ensues is the worst attempt at a fantasy franchise based on young adult fiction since The Mortal Instruments' City of Bones. The movie is mostly expository dialogue to attempt to immerse you in the lore of its world, but neither the lore nor the world are in any way compelling. I remember calling it castrated Middle Earth. You don't want to explore these hollow, boring, and unlikable characters, and the world they inhabited is equally hollow, boring, and generic. It's completely dull with terrible special effects, ridiculous costumes, uninspired action sequences, and bad performances from everyone, and I'm going to single out Jeff Bridges' abysmal efforts here. How on earth did nobody who had effective control over this project say no to that ridiculous voice? Yeah, it's so bad it's good, for about 10 minutes, but then it's like Johnny Depp and Mordecai all over again. The same could be said about the whole movie for that matter. It's funny bad for a couple minutes, but it's not long before Seventh Son becomes an endurance test. But what sets this over the edge, what makes it worse than Pixels, is how it one-ups the sexism from Pixels. Seventh Son is downright misogynistic. The only woman who makes it out alive is the one who threw herself at the charisma-free hero. All the others get brutally killed and burned to death, and while it sounds like I'm reading far too into the gender politics of this, I don't think I am. The movie goes out of its way to show how brutally killed the women are, and how awesome it is that our white dude heroes are for doing the killing. Oh, and the only male villain is a black dude who gets messed up in a nasty way that we're supposed to think is cool, so the movie's also kinda racist. So yeah, Seventh Son is rotten, and it's only the fourth worst movie I saw in 2015. Number 3, 50 Shades of Grey. Oh man, you all knew this one was coming. Like Pixels, I don't know what I can say about 50 Shades of Grey that everyone else hasn't already said a million times. This was probably the highest profile stinker of the year, and I was dumbstruck at how empty it was from start to finish. I remember before this came out, all anybody talked about was how there was over 20 minutes of BDSM, and I thought, gee, what are they going to do for the other hour and a half? As it turns out, pretty much nothing happens. Look, I get why 50 Shades of Grey the novel sold well. Titillation. The way this works is as follows. Step 1. As a woman is lying in bed before sleeping, she has an itch that needs to be scratched, and the only way for that to happen is to read a chapter out of her new favorite naughty book. Step 2. She reads her chapter and meets her, oh dear, oh my, quota for the night. Step 3. She's satisfied and goes to sleep. Step 4. She continues this ritual the following night. As a book, an individual has complete control over the pacing of 50 Shades of Grey and can read it whenever they want, usually short intervals to meet their steamy desires. But in a movie, your steamy desires are met in a few minutes, and once they've been satisfied, you begin to want something a little more intellectually challenging to keep your attention. 50 Shades of Grey is a novelty reading experience, and to even consider it a possibility for a mainstream dramatic narrative is a joke. You spend an hour and 50 minutes in somebody's sexual fantasy, and then the movie stops. Nobody has a character. The only reason any of these people are talking is so the movie can make it sound sexy, and so they can jump in bed together. That's it. There are no motivations. There are no consequences to any actions. There are no actions. There are no characters. There are only two blank slates for the male and female viewers to project themselves onto in order to be sexually teased, titillated, and, at worst, fulfilled by the movie. And you want to know the worst part? They couldn't even do that right, because the characters and their interactions are so dull, lifeless, and boring, the sex isn't even good, and that's the selling point. I don't even feel comfortable qualifying 50 Shades of Grey as a movie, and it's only the third worst movie of 2015. Number 2, The Vatican Tapes. Oh man, now we've reached the worst horror movie of the year. The Vatican Tapes is the worst horror movie I've ever seen, and is going to take an anti-miracle to dethrone it. No, it's not a found footage movie. There's found footage elements arbitrarily inserted at random, but this happens so randomly and without any impact on the plot that it might as well not have been there. The Vatican is only a couple of cyber monks that walk and talk around empty church corridors like Sith Lords in a Star Wars prequel and awkwardly spew exposition at the audience. So if you think you're getting a found footage horror movie about the secrets of the Vatican, you're sorely mistaken. That might have been semi-interesting. The Vatican Tapes is, I guess, about a girl who gets possessed by the Antichrist and her family doesn't know what to do. Oh, just a generic exorcism movie, huh, you say? Well, yeah, on the surface it is just a generic possession exorcism movie, but it's all in the execution that makes it so especially horrendous. There is not a main character. The boyfriend, the dad, Michael Pena, and the cyber Sith priests are all trying to figure out what's happening to the main blonde chick, but all of them are very much in varying degrees of supporting roles. The possessed blonde chick is a mystery for much of the runtime, and mostly serves as a MacGuffin and catalyst for the plot. So who am I supposed to care about? It's also not scary. At one point, a crow flies through the window on a bus and everyone freaks out like the bus is on fire. Has anybody in this universe seen a crow before? It's like this every time a crow shows up. And since the movie makes no effort to link the crow as a symbol of evil, I just assume everyone hasn't seen a crow before. It's also a visual crime against humanity. It looks like the entire movie was filmed with a TV flashback filter. Everyone looks washed out like they're in Birdemic. But the big scenes are confusingly shot, like the aforementioned crow in the bus scene, the asylum fight, and the exorcism. The filming and editing of these scenes was like being turned upside down and shaken. But I guess that's what happens when it's directed by one of the visionaries behind Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. Apparently the Vatican tapes has a twist ending, but I couldn't tell you what it was. Is an exorcism not working seriously considered a twist this day and age? Or is the twist that she's the Antichrist? Because they implied that so heavily, the revelation didn't have any impact. The Vatican tapes was a dull, incoherent mess slapped together, and the second worst movie of 2015. Thank God it was only an hour and a half. Number 1. Black Hat. It is often a joke that January movies are a blight on the human race. But then every once in a while, we get a movie so bad, so devoid of anything possibly artistic, entertaining, or interesting. Something so bad, the basic premise of the movie has no potential, and there are no thematic elements whatsoever. I, Frankenstein was the worst movie of 2014, and it is rotten, but it's not one of the worst things I've ever seen. Sometimes you see a movie so unbelievably abysmal, you're shocked you experienced something that could possibly be created by a human. That is what the experience of watching Black Hat was like for me. I have a saying that goes like, there is only so bad a movie can be. Once a movie hits that mark, what differentiates one rock-bottom movie from the other is how long it is. I, Frankenstein, hit that lowest point. The Vatican tapes hit that lowest point, but those movies were a merciful 90 minutes. Black Hat hits that lowest point, but it's worse than both of those movies because it's a full 2 hours and 13 minutes. It takes serious talent to make something so bad, and it came from writer-director Michael Mann and stars Chris Hemsworth and Viola Davis. That's right, the man who gave us The Last of the Mohicans, Heat, and Collateral, teamed with an Academy Award winner and one of the most charismatic and likable leading men in the business, and gave us this. So what's so bad about it? First of all, there isn't a plot. Second of all, there aren't any characters. So by definition, there isn't a story in Black Hat. The premise of the film is that a nuclear reactor in China melts down due to an evil hacker. As a result, some guy who has no emotional investment or interest in the meltdown of a nuclear reactor enlists the help of the world's greatest computer hacker, Chris Hemsworth, to find the man who did it. That's right, a man who has no emotional investment or interest in the meltdown of a nuclear reactor enlists the help of a man who has even less emotional investment and interest to find the guy who did it. Why? If nobody in this movie cares about the catalyst of the plot, then why the blue hell should I? The reason the Chinese dude needed Chris Hemsworth's help is because the code used to disrupt the power plant was a variation on Hemsworth's code, and Hemsworth agrees to go along and find whoever did this because he's angry somebody used a variation on his code without his permission. No, seriously, that's the reason. Also, how would anybody know what code was used to hack the power plant if the nuclear reactor melted down? It melted down! Everything was destroyed! So the movie from there is about a selfish jerk-faced Chris Hemsworth and a band of bland sidekicks who also have no emotional investment or interest in the meltdown of a Chinese power plant, as they try to find the man who did it. That's it. They just look for the guy. They go from one location to the next and engage in bland, artless, unengaging action scene after bland, artless, unengaging action scene. The ADR is abominable. At one point, Chris Hemsworth lifts a bottle and you hear a stock crash sound effect without him ever hitting the bottle on a table. And in the next shot, it looks as if it had already been smashed. Chris Hemsworth's obligatory girlfriend is an actress who is clearly speaking English, but every line is redubbed in English, but it's out of sync with the lips of the character the words are supposedly coming out of. The film grasps at random to have some kind of emotional hook in the middle among its supposed players with the cheapest audience manipulator. Who did you lose on 9/11? What does 9/11 have to do with any of this? Oh, and then Hemsworth finds out the evil master plan of the evil hacker guy who caused the meltdown. It's to blow up some turbines in the middle of nowhere to raise the price of copper. What emotional investment or interest does anybody in the movie have to do with the price of copper? What does copper have to do with any of this? If we're picking arbitrary crap to raise the price of, why not stuffed animals? Finally, Hemsworth finds the guy, and he just stabs the guy to death. And then the movie stops. No philosophical discussion about the nature of hacking, no last attempt at character or thematic anything. He just stabs the guy to death, and the movie ends with Chris Hemsworth literally going to the bank. I've seen critics and online reviewers say that at least Michael Mann has a style to his direction, and Michael Mann sure knows how to direct an action scene, and they're the highlights of Black Hat. Firstly, I'm not sure when we started calling lethargic direction style, but if that's what's going on, then we're going way too easy on Michael Mann because he's Michael Mann. Secondly, not even the action scenes work. Excessively poor audio quality aside, the action scenes still blow chunks. Flat angles with slow, monotonous blocking from one side of the frame to the other, boring editing of one flat angle to another flat angle. At one point, I actually fell asleep. People walked out of the screening I attended. Speaking of leaving, the moment I walked out of Black Hat, I realized, oh, I'm awake. I'm alive. So yes, the only comparison I give this movie is to that of a nightmare. Black Hat is not only one of the 5 worst movies I've ever seen in my life, but it's also up there with All-Star Batman as one of the worst pieces of media created by a human, and without a doubt the worst movie I saw in 2015. Disappointments for me this year included Bridge of Spies. Not a bad movie, but one that was a little boring and left me a little disinterested. Didn't live up to the hype, especially of a lot of the critical acclaim it was receiving at the time. Fantastic was a terrible, terrible, terrible movie. I didn't quite hate it as much as everyone else did, but it didn't hold together well at all on a narrative angle, and the reshoots were glaringly obvious. I was really excited for this one, especially after Chronicle, and I was excited to see what Josh Trank would do with a bigger budget, but he got screwed over by the studio, and the movie he was going to make wasn't very good to begin with, and the finished product was pretty terrible. The Good Dinosaur. I also didn't hate this movie. It was just really middle of the road, and in terms of Pixar movies, I expected a little bit more. The animation was very good, but not particularly great, especially in the character design, and the story itself was meh. Everest, pretty good cast, but I'm not a big fan of disaster movies. I am, however, a big fan of survival stories, and this fell more into the camp of disaster movie and not so much of a survival movie, although here the line was definitely blurred. The big ensemble cast allowed for you to not really know any one person particularly well, and all the big nature events were treated like disaster moments, and like I said, I find those usually boring and I don't like disaster movies. And Mistress America. This movie really annoyed me and I didn't like it. I find Noah Baumbach's style thoroughly annoying, and I was really excited for this because I like Greta Gerwig and I had not seen a Noah Baumbach film before, but I was hearing a lot of good things about this movie in particular, and I saw it and it just was not good. It was like a screwball comedy and a farce, and not really good at either of them, and I found all of the characters to be thoroughly unlikable, but I did like Greta Gerwig's performance. Now, before I move into my best movies of the year, here are some honorable mentions. In order, we go. Number 18, The Big Short. Number 17, Mr. Holmes. Number 16, Kingsman, The Secret Service. Number 15, The Gift. Number 14, Creed. Number 13, Steve Jobs. Number 12, Brooklyn. And number 11, It Follows. Number 10, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. There is something to be said about the watchability of entertainment. Something to be said about a movie you can just pop into your DVD or Blu-ray player at any given time. Something that works so well on escapist thrills and excitement, which the craftsmanship in which it's made heightens the quality of the film. It's also impressive when a long-running franchise seemingly gets better with each installment, learning from its mistakes and gets better, without jumping the shark, and better. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is one such film. We love Simon Pegg as Benji, so we get Benji in a more involved role. We love Ving Rhames as Luther Stickle, so we get more Luther Stickle. We love the ridiculous stunts Tom Cruise pulls off, so we get bigger and crazier stunts performed and filmed with excellence. And we love the impossible missions, so we get a variety of tense, pulse-pounding, and exciting missions. But the franchise is also improving on itself. We get a great female lead in Rebecca Ferguson, who's the most interesting character in the movie and gets a lot of involvement in the plot. While I thought the villain was the weakest element in the movie, he's leaps and bounds better than the villain of Ghost Protocol. And the team dynamic is stronger than it's ever been. It's still a Tom Cruise vehicle, but the supporting cast shares more of the spotlight than they ever have. Plus, it's just plain fun. It's a blast to watch, and that underwater stealth sequence which becomes a car chase, which becomes a bike chase, is maybe the best piece of action storytelling and filmmaking of the year. Well, almost. In a year of some pretty good spy movies, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation stands on top as the best of the bunch. Because of this, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation just makes it into my top 10 of 2015. Number 9, The Revenant. I am a sucker for a good man versus nature survival story, and The Revenant might be the magnum opus of the subgenre. Alejandro González Iñárritu's follow-up to his Oscar-winning Birdman sees the director at his most ambitious we've seen him, surrounded by an incredible cast in Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hardy, Will Poulter, and Domhnall Gleeson, who's also in Brooklyn this year. This movie is brutal, at times hard to watch, but a rewarding experience in the end. Leonardo DiCaprio is probably going to finally get his Oscar this year, and for good reason. His work as Hugh Glass is mesmerizing. For an actor whose strength is yelling, DiCaprio really impressed me with an animalistic physical performance. Everything is rippling across his face, as in his actions, since his character's throat is slashed by a bear half an hour into a 2.5-hour long movie. Ideas and themes such as the nature of vengeance, the difference between man and animal, and the force of nature are presented in a movie that captivated me. Iñárritu's direction demonstrates his mastery of visual storytelling, and the glorious use of natural lighting make the movie look and feel like no movie I've ever seen. Tom Hardy as the id of humanity is also a standout, with a performance that could have so easily been a mustache-twirling villain in the hands of a lesser actor, but Hardy's rough persona and almost unintelligible dialogue are wonderfully offset by a character with some twisted humanity and some genuine philosophy. The Revenant may be too depressing, too slow, too hard, and too long for some, but for me it was a theater experience I've witnessed twice and can't wait to again, and it's my 9th favorite movie of 2015. Number 8, The Hateful Eight. I guess you could say 2015 was the year auteur directors made snowy westerns, because in addition to Alejandro González Iñárritu's The Revenant, Quentin Tarantino gave us The Hateful Eight. I'm kind of surprised at the somewhat lukewarm reception this film has received, because I thought it was awesome. Truth be told, even if the script isn't quite as good, I liked The Hateful Eight more than Django Unchained. In my eyes, Tarantino's always been a better writer than director, but that's because he's arguably the best writer in the industry. But with The Hateful Eight, he shows how much he's improved in his directorial craft in just 3 years. The story is Tarantino's stab at an Agatha Christie-esque locked room mystery about 8-ish horrible people locked in a cabin during a blizzard sometime after the Civil War. The choice to shoot the film on 70mm Ultra Panavision was one that had me scratching my head at first. Why would a movie set 80% in a one dirty room be shot on the same format as Ben-Hur and Lawrence of Arabia? But the choice totally fits. lending a large scope not to the size of the casts or the sets, but in the large scale of the characters' feelings. Every wrinkle or furrowed eyebrow is captured in great detail, adding to the tension that boils till the bloody end. But on top of that, the size of the frame allows Tarantino to show off a bit in how intricate and well blocked the production is. There might not be a need for Michael Madsen to be shaking in a corner out of focus, but it adds something. It makes Minnie's haberdashery feel lived in and alive, but also small and claustrophobic. But the cast is excellent too. Kurt Russell is awesome as a paranoid bounty hunter who takes himself way too seriously. Samuel L. Jackson owns the movie as a fellow bounty hunter waiting for the chance to justify killing. Jennifer Jason Leigh gives a marvelous, mostly physical performance as Kurt Russell's prisoner. Walton Goggins steals the show as a brown-nosing southerner who may or may not be who he says he is, and Tim Roth is deliciously hammy. Can we please have more Tim Roth in our lives? Please? But under all the great performances, awesome monologues, and impressive direction is a script about the nature of justice in the hands of the people in the justice business. This is probably Tarantino's most idea-centric story, and while the movie might be his most self-indulgent, The Hateful Eight is also one of my favorites from him, and, funny enough, is my 8th favorite movie of 2015. Number 7, Spotlight. When I talked about how much I hated the Vatican tapes, I mentioned that the movie had no main character. I don't mean that a movie needs to have a main character to be good, but having numerous characters in supporting roles with nobody to play off of, and an absence of a central focus, will make for a bad movie. The ensemble cast is where we have multiple characters working together against a conflict, and they complement one another and flesh each other out. In a year full of ensemble pieces, Spotlight was the best. I couldn't tell you who gave the best performance out of Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Mark Ruffalo, Stanley Tucci, and Liev Schreiber. Everybody brought their A-game in a movie about the Boston Globe Catholic priest sex scandal in the early 2000s that will make you lose your faith in humanity, make you wish journalism wasn't the farce it is today, and then make you regain some faith in humanity. This movie is tough, but not in the way The Revenant is. Tom McCarthy's incredibly subtle direction tells the story like an objective journalist, just showing you the facts and how the people who uncovered the truth reacted. But the other part of McCarthy's direction nicely complements the script he co-wrote with Josh Singer. It somehow manages to feed its audience an abundance of information in a natural, digestible way. It's an expertly constructive journalism movie, and one that is surprisingly rewatchable. While its subject matter is tough and McCarthy uses a respectable tone, it's so intriguing and fascinating watching what happened that you want to see it again and again just to pick up on everything. This movie also totally works as a singular movie, and the based on a true story element never feels like an excuse to overlook poor storytelling. 9/11 is handled in the perfect possible way within the story, and I don't feel like I was told the story from a biased party either. I feel like I can just sit down and watch Spotlight without having to fact check, which is a miracle in itself. Spotlight is a great movie. Don't let the subject matter scare you off, so watch it and see why it's my 7th favorite movie of 2015. Number 6, Ex Machina. Artificial intelligence sure is a popular subject, especially in science fiction. Blade Runner is a pretty influential movie in that field, and you can still feel its influence in several 2015 films such as Gem and the Holograms, Avengers Age of Ultron, Terminator Genesis, Chappie, and Bruce Willis in Rock the Casbah. But I think the best AI movie of the year was hands down the small indie sci-fi thriller Ex Machina. This movie rocks. The movie follows Domhnall Gleeson, who is also in The Revenant, as an employee of a super popular search engine company that's pretty much Google, who wins a contest to hang out with the founder of the company, played by Oscar Isaac, for a weekend to test out a lifelike robot, played by Alicia Vikander. This is all set up for a movie that's basically a series of conversations, and boy oh man is it captivating and thought-provoking. Alex Garland, the writer of 28 Days Later and Sunshine, both writes and directs this one, and he knocked it out of the park. The film is shot with beautiful style, and the visual effects are seamlessly integrated. Ava the android looks incredible, and the makeup and prosthetics are used in an impressive way too. But the best thing about Ex Machina is Oscar Isaac. If you loved him as Poe Dameron in Star Wars, wait till you get a load of Nathan. He's the 21st century mad scientist, young, smart, and charismatic enough to make you forget how insane he really is. At Rose City Comic Con 2015, I attended a Q&A with Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, who said Oscar Isaac in Ex Machina somehow topped Jeffrey Combs from Reanimator. He's also a presence always felt and eventually creates the creepy, enigmatic tone that builds throughout the film. Plus, his chemistry with Domhnall Gleeson, who was also in Brooklyn and The Revenant this year, was always changing, and the two men's performance brought the best out in one another. But Alicia Vikander was a surprise for me too. She's vulnerable, smart, and mysterious as Ava, pulling off an important and essential piece of the story that could have so easily not worked. Yeah, the ending drags on for what seems like forever, and it does tread on familiar ground and can feel like Blade Runner the Explained Cut at times, but it's still a great piece of modern sci-fi and captivates the mind enough to be my 6th favorite movie of 2015. Number 5, Grandma. There was a couple instances of surprise in 2015, especially for smaller films, like the aforementioned Ex Machina, but also in It Follows, Mr. Holmes, and The Gift, were movies I expected next to nothing from, but got a lot out of. The most surprising, however, was a film called Grandma, a vehicle for aging comedian Lily Tomlin, from the writer-director of the first 2 American Pie movies and the Fokker trilogy, about a lesbian grandma who helps her pregnant granddaughter to find enough money for an abortion. That sounds like a raunchy buddy comedy with lame old people jokes that also attempts to cram a half-baked ultra-progressive sermon about acceptance down our throats just waiting to happen. But it's not. In reality, Grandma is a hilarious, melancholic movie about choices. Choices we make, choices we choose not to make, how our choices affect who we are and how we live our lives, and how we learn to accept ourselves once we've made our choices. Lily Tomlin is electric. She owns every scene she's in, which is basically every scene, and really shows herself off. Sure, she's playing a little bit of the crazy grandma shtick, but that's only a part of her layered performance. She's also playing a woman who is still in grief and has to come to terms with her life as it is and accept the past as the past. The movie is more or less a journey through her life and uses the "we gotta find money for an abortion" scenario brilliantly as a framework to explore. But the best thing about Grandma is how the movie never takes sides. The movie never says if the decisions our characters make or are going to make are the right ones, but whatever choices are made, and they'll have to stand by those choices and accept if others don't agree. It's also got probably the most underrated supporting performance of the year in Sam Elliott, an old flame of Lily Tomlin's years of self-discovery. He's only in the movie for about 20 minutes, if that, but the dimensions he adds to the story and the character of Elle are insurmountable. But it's also very funny. Nat Wolff's cameo as the father of Sage's unborn child is awesome, and Julia Gardner as Sage, Elle's pregnant granddaughter, is a great airheaded foil for Elle's jaded but loving grandmother. The dialogue is sharp as a tack, and the handheld style of shooting is a smart way to get around budget limitations and blend the comedy and tragedy of the story in a natural way. If you haven't seen it yet, please watch Grandma. It's a funny and melancholic story about choices, regret, and the bond between women and family that uses its 80 minutes extremely efficiently, and is also my 5th favorite movie of 2015. Number 4, The Martian. As I said before, I'm a sucker for a good man versus nature survival story, but science fiction is my favorite genre. As you could imagine, a man versus nature science fiction survival story would be a dream come true, but even I was blown away by just how much I loved The Martian. Drew Goddard's excellent script, paired with Ridley Scott's detail-oriented direction, was a match made in heaven, and Matt Damon's pitch-perfect turn as astronaut Mark Watney was the reason this movie works as well as it does. Watney is a fantastic character whom you not only want to get out of this seemingly impossible situation, but a character whom you want to watch get out of this situation, and the dimension Damon brings to him is something to behold. It's an unabashed crowd pleaser, but it's a crowd pleaser with a great and meaningful message. It's an optimistic movie about the power of the human spirit. The parallel stories of Watney on Mars and NASA trying to get him home perfectly complement one another as the internal and external struggle humanity faces and the rich rewards reap when the two are applied and succeed. This is very much science fiction, and I can see this becoming another one of Scott's sci-fi classics in the future. I can also see it in a great double feature with Blade Runner, one optimistic and one depressing. The acting is great, the music is great, the action is great, the writing is great, the dialogue is great, the direction is great, and the characters are great. Donald Glover might be a little underwhelming, but The Martian is an excellent sci-fi film and my 4th favorite movie of 2015. Number 3, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. It's Star Wars. The first time I saw Star Wars The Force Awakens was maybe the greatest movie-going experience of my life, and it may have made me think this movie was better than it was. Nah, because I saw it a second time and it was just as great. By now everyone has seen it and has an opinion on it, and I adored it. Every single one of the new characters were great. John Boyega's Finn was a charismatic, likable, and funny ex-stormtrooper who was experiencing life for the first time, but also had to learn how to deal with what comes with living a free life. Daisy Ridley was the find of the year as Rey, a charming, infinitely resourceful, and hardworking girl with more behind her than one might think, who's introduced in director J.J. Abrams' greatest 5 minutes of dialogue-free visual storytelling. Oscar Isaac is the coolest as pilot Poe Dameron. Domhnall Gleeson, who was also in Brooklyn the Revenant and Ex Machina this year, was gleefully hammy as Space Nazi General Hux, and Captain Phasma, Supreme Leader Snoke, BB-8, and others added great color to the new feel of the galaxy far, far away. But Adam Driver as Kylo Ren might just emerge as the best of the new characters, with so many layers in both the character and performance. But my absolute favorite thing about The Force Awakens was no doubt the bringing back of the religious element of the Force and the complicated new components between it and the new characters. In the original Star Wars, the Force was referred to as a religion a number of times, and in the prequels became a really bad sci-fi concept in the form of midichlorians. In The Force Awakens, we got back to those themes of religion, lineage, and legacy. No, Starkiller Base did not bother me, as it represented the sense of escalation that we never got from the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi. Oh, and while the film shares a large number of plot points in the original Star Wars, that doesn't mean it's the same story. We got something familiar, but new. It's exciting, has great characters, deep themes, and is all around a brilliant piece of genre filmmaking, and I cannot wait for Episode 8. But for now, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, is my third favorite movie of 2015. Number 2, Mad Max Fury Road. Action movies have taken a sharp turn for the generic in recent years, but 2015 saw something of a comeback for good action movies, at least action that was filmed well. As I said before, we got Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Say what you will about the movie, but the action in Spectre was spectacular. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. had a blend of filming styles and always managed to look good, and even Spy, a comedy, had moments of exciting action. But none came close to the pulse-pounding, frenetic, crazy excitement of Mad Max Fury Road. I really don't have any more to add to the discussion of Fury Road. It's already been analyzed a million times and hailed as a masterpiece and the best action movie of the 21st century thus far, if not of all time. But yeah, I loved it just like everybody else because it's awesome. It's kind of like the anti-Star Wars prequel, a movie solely comprised of people doing things, a true action movie. Everything is communicated through action. The story is told predominantly in a visual manner. You don't need to be told anything about the culture of Immortan Joe's kingdom. Everything is shown to you. It's a 2-hour car chase full of white-knuckle action and testosterone-fueling explosions that also contains a deep, thoughtful story about oppression, loss, redemption, the state of the film industry, the state of action films, and how to solve the problems of the films industry and action films within it. But the movie also has its own charm, likable characters that stand on their own independent from the themes that they embody, lush and beautifully colorful cinematography, a majestic and bombastic musical score, and a ridiculously high level of raw energy no other movie this year was able to reach. It's amazing, you saw it, you know it's amazing, and it's my second favorite movie of 2015. Number 1, Inside Out. Truth be told, 2015 was kind of a rough year for the animated feature film. Strange Magic was your token terrible January animated movie. Minions sucked. The Good Dinosaur was a huge disappointment. Home sucked. Hotel Transylvania 2 was annoying. And while there were your SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, and the Peanut movies, the bad really outweighed the good. But that doesn't mean the best movie of the year couldn't be an animated movie, and Pete Docter came back with a vengeance to get Pixar back on track with Inside Out. I loved this movie. This movie is hilarious, smart, deeply moving, and a wonderful example of what can be achieved with the animated form. Joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust make up the emotions inside of the mind of 11-year-old Riley, whose family makes a big move to San Francisco, and the inner adventure of joy and sadness being flung to the farthest reaches of her mind. What precedes is a wonderful metaphor for how the young mind deals with change. Change in environment, change in the body, change in thinking, change in relationships, becoming a new person, forgetting what made you what you were as a young child. Inside Out deals with all of those ideas and joyously incorporates loads of jokes about the mind that also add to the story and layer the rich world of the mind, including abstract thought, nightmares and dreams, imaginary friends, imagination, thought, personality, memories, and many others. The message is also refreshing. You could call this movie In Defense of Sadness, as it's about the acceptance of things that are necessary for the functioning community, just as sadness is important to self-acceptance. Everybody said it, but the casting is perfect, even down to Kyle MacLachlan as the dad. Pete Docter's previous two films were Monsters Incorporated and Up, and it's hard to not see Docter's progression in storytelling. While I think Up is a better movie, it is my pick for greatest animated movie of all time, Inside Out represents an ambition in a family film I've not seen since Up, and the story is equally well told. Then there's the business of the animation. Oh lord, the animation is incredible. I know what you're thinking. Connor, the animation in every animated feature is incredible. And you're right, even Stranger Magic was gorgeously animated. But Inside Out, like the Lego Movie, has a unique aesthetic to it. It doesn't look like Brave or Cars because it falls in line with Docter's other animated films. It is shape-oriented like Up. Sadness is a teardrop, disgust is broccoli, fear is a jagged line, anger is a square, but has a different texture to the rendering. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Michael Giacchino's impeccable musical score. The opening with the visual of the first memories lighting up Riley's mind, accompanied by that music, is movie magic through and through. My eyes even welled up a little bit. A movie that promised to be something special, and it followed through on that promise. Speaking of tears, I cried and cried and cried during Inside Out, which was a feat only Up had managed to accomplish. Come on, Pete Docter, you're the only storyteller to make me cry! So yes, Inside Out was the best, and my favorite, movie of 2015. Everything came together beautifully to create a deep story about change and acceptance with impeccable storytelling. I could talk about it forever, so I'm just going to shut up now. Alright everyone, what were your favorite, least favorite, biggest surprises, biggest disappointments, and favorite performances from movies of 2015? What did you think of 2015? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. See you next time.